for helping us to be a better school system and be a sustainable school system, given the residential tax base and the commercial industrial tax base. So that is one of my biggest problems. The Department of Education has implemented a new evaluation system that we have implemented for the first time this year. It is significantly time-consuming, but it's a very beneficial system in terms of developing better and more focused conversations with staff and a greater focus on student learning. As you know, we have, or may or may not know, we have a English language learner mandate. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts is under a mandate from the Department of Justice to more thoroughly educate students whose first language may not be English. The Department of Education is looking at a possible alternative to the MCAS assessment system, which is, the acronym is called PARC. It's an assessment system that is designed to measure career and academic and college readiness and preparedness. They're expecting school systems to have a certain level of technology infrastructure. However, the department is not entirely sure that they are in fact going to adopt this system to replace the MCAS. And so there are a number of issues that we have to deal with, that we have to address, along with, as you know, the mandates of special education, which are very important. And what I don't ever want to do is pit the programs and needs of children that require special education services against our regular education services. We're responsible for educating every single student. So I want to listen to you, given the fact that our numbers are beginning to decline slowly. The local, regional, national economy is slightly growth oriented, but changing that immediately, as you know, is like changing a cruise liner in terms of its orientation. And then the mandates that we're dealing with are significant. So what are the issues, what are the questions, what are the concerns that you have that Kathy and I might be able to provide some information on or take back and develop some responses so that in preparation for next year's town meeting, we have the answers that we have prided ourselves on having in the past? Because we heard from this year's town meeting, Bill, we need to be very cognizant of the rate of growth of the school budget. Okay? And I heard that loud and clear, and I'm sure every one of us who attended town meeting did. Now I have to fulfill my responsibility, but I also have to be cognizant of where your concerns are. So I'm open to questions, comments, concerns from any of you in terms of how do we make it fit.
I always hear about these unfunded mandates, particularly with regard to the school. And I know one is, well, I wouldn't necessarily call it unfunded, but one is the special ed. But I wonder if you could do two things. One is give some description of what the boundaries of the special ed mandate are. How you know when you've met the requirement. And the second one is sort of what are the other, if there are, what are the other sort of heavy-hitting mandates that you have to comply with?
I think Bill asked a question about what are the special education mandates that school systems are working under. What are the significant issues that we deal with, and how do we know we complied with them adequately? First of all, we're responsible for educating any child who has evidence of special needs from the age of 3 to 22. We start that in our preschool program at the Millennium School, all the way up through high school. And what we're working on right now is trying to develop an in-house transition program for those students between the ages of 18 and 22. Because right now, the Merrimack Special Education Collaborative or some other collaborative provides services to those students, mostly occupational services in nature. We're responsible for diagnosing a student's needs. Could be cognitive, could be emotional, social in nature. We go through a very careful selection process. What we don't do is we don't accept students into a special education program and provide them services if they're not legitimately diagnosed as having a need that qualifies under the IDEA Act, okay? The Special Education Act. We have a specific progress. We have a team assessment. We have team meetings with parents and educators and sometimes outside expert witnesses such as neuropsychologists. And we combine all that in terms of what is it that we need to provide a student with program. We try to provide as much programming in-house as possible because we can control the quality of the program and we're not paying someone's profit overhead in that program. We develop an IEP that a parent can either accept or decline. If the parent accepts it, we proceed forward with services. If the parent declines the IEP and wants additional services or different services, then that sometimes goes to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals. There's a mediator who comes in. We have some preliminary discussions, but sometimes that does go to a full board hearing, which involves some degree of testimony by both parties and the lawyers involved. So it's a very complex process. It's a very time-consuming process. So that once a parent signs off, then we begin to provide services to those children. And, my feeling is that we do as much as we can to provide those services to children because that's our ethical obligation. We all know it. We all understand it. Can it be expensive? Yes, it can. Let me just explain to you briefly about the reimbursement for special education. The Commonwealth has what is called a circuit breaker program, where we get a certain amount of reimbursement for what is referred to as high-cost students. If we have a student, for example, that has a tuition of $100,000, for example, in an outside placement, we're responsible for what is referred to as the first, about $44,000, which is 4 times what's called the Foundation Reserve budget. So it's about $44,000. If the Department of Ed, so that leaves about $56,000 remaining. If the Department of Ed approves that reimbursement, and let's say the reimbursement rate is 50%, we get 50% of that $56,000 or $23,000 back from the state. So we're responsible for about 2/3 of the tuition as such. The Department of Ed picks up about 1/3 as a percentage of our total outlay. Okay? Even though they'll use a figure of 60 or 70%, that's 60 or 70% of the increment between what we're responsible for and the total cost. Okay, so it's a fairly complicated subject, as they always say, to appropriation. So we're uncertain from one year to another how much actual circuit breaker appropriation is going to be reimbursement is going to be available to Westford and every other city and town across the state. Bill, are there any other issues that I missed on?
Well, I'd asked about other mandates, but maybe somebody else has a question.
Other than, we are using the Common Core standards. The Common Core was developed through a process developing the chief state school officers a number of years ago. The Commonwealth approved using the Common Core, replacing the curriculum frameworks of the Department of Education. It hasn't involved an extraordinary expense. In some cases, the biggest impact of the Common Core standards, and they are rigorous standards, is that the positioning of certain concepts in the Common Core is a little bit different than the Massachusetts frameworks. In some cases, they've moved something up a grade level, but more often they've moved something, a concept, down a grade level. And so that has required us to make some modifications to our curriculum, some modifications in professional development to our staff. But for the most part, the transition from the Massachusetts frameworks to the federal Common Core standards has been pretty seamless in our school system. Has involved the primary focus in English language arts and mathematics. One of the big differences that we along with other school systems are working on is the requirement that reading be very much integrated into the instructional process in all content areas. And for those of us, if I can take us back 20, 30, 40, some of us 50 years, if you remember algebraic word problems, where you and I maybe struggled a little bit at first, and the reason we did is because we had a hard time reading what the problem actually was asking or presenting to us for information. Same thing with scientific tests. In terms of understanding tables, understanding symbols, understanding scientific terms. We're required now to focus much more on the development of understanding both symbols, words, text, and those content areas, and therefore developing students' written and oral skills in those respective content areas. So that's probably the biggest area of the Common Core. But once again, that requires more professional development than a wholesale change of either the curriculum or materials themselves. Before I get to the next question, in terms of crushing mandates, Bill, I think special education is the largest. I wouldn't consider many of the others much crushing as they are probably fiscal nuisances. For cases in point, when we built our new schools, the Department of Environmental Protection required us to build a certain number of septic treatment facilities. The treatment facility at the academy was built under one set of groundwater discharge regulations. In the last, was it 2 years, a year and a half or so, the DEP has changed the groundwater discharge regulations for Westford Academy because of its proximity to one of the town's wells. Well, we've probably spent $100,000, probably $100,000 trying to come into compliance with those new standards that were not in effect when that building was built, designed, and built. So there are some instances where after the fact, we're getting crushed fiscally because of those mandates. Some of the others, let's see, we've got, yes, thank you for reminding me. The exclusion and expulsion law that we're required to meet beginning July 1st of next year, 2014. That law states that any child that we seek to either expel or exclude, the difference between expulsion and exclusion is exclusion, we exclude them for a short amount of time. Expulsion is when we permanently remove a student from the school system. What the new law indicates is that we cannot have a child out of the school system for any more than 90 days. And we have to be responsible for his or her education. So, in our budget projections that the town manager, that the finance committee, and the selectmen have asked every town department to prepare, we're trying to factor in some degree of personnel or expense that can be captured that will apply to either in-house programming, or I'm also working with the Merrimack Special Education Collaborative to see if they can provide us with a very competitive rate if we need to outsource those students to that collaborative. Look, we want to be as compassionate and understanding as possible. But if there are students who have habitual drug and alcohol problems who are impacting the remainder of our student population, it's our responsibility not only to help that student, but also to ensure a safe and appropriate learning environment for the other students. Is it going to be a burden on cities and towns fiscally and programmatically? Yes, it will. So there's that one. There's a number of other mandates that are smaller scale, but they're $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 at a time. Jim?
Is that a state or a federal mandate?
The exclusion expulsion, that's a state mandate. We now have to also, beginning sometime at the beginning of the school year, which is a good thing, but the state has not worked out how it's going to implement this yet, is a new fingerprinting law. You know, the Corey law, which is very important, and we Corey everyone who is looking to, who we are looking to employ. We don't Corey those who are candidates. We Corey those who we want to hire. That doesn't cover crimes that a person may have been involved with outside of the state of Massachusetts. So this is a good thing. It's just that the state isn't quite sure how it's going to implement the fingerprint law. The employee is going to be responsible for the payment of that. It will go into a national fingerprint database, which is a good thing. The state is in the process of securing a contractor. What's that, Bill?
What is that law?
That's the new fingerprint law as part of the background check.
To be employed in the school?
To be employed in the school or for the most part any municipality. which I have to say, it is a good requirement. Hopefully it won't provide any fiscal burden on us, or be any fiscal burden on us, because as of right now, the employee is supposed to be responsible for the cost of it. The Commonwealth is trying to procure a subcontractor or a contractor to conduct this statewide, and I don't believe, speaking of the chief, I don't believe the state has settled on a contract yet, although we're supposed to implement this for the beginning of the school. So, let me get to another question. Last year, there was a tremendous amount of conversation about drugs in Westford schools. What have you done to address the concerns we had last year's strategic plan meeting? We hired the school resource officer, and Justin Agraz is our school resource officer. He has been in the high school, walking through the halls, developing relationships with students. We've brought the canine units in more often than not. Some school systems are reluctant to do that. We're not. Okay, because that's all part of a safe environment. In talking with Jim Antonelli, the number of incidents of drugs being found on or around the school property are dramatically down this year. Dramatically down. We've had a couple of minor incidents. Other than that, we haven't had anything. We just had the canines go through about 3 weeks ago, and nothing was found. Now, does that mean the kids are not using drugs? No, it doesn't. Because what the kids are doing now, so if we're talking with the chief, talking with kids throughout the schools, is kids are dropping the drugs off in the woods or stashing it someplace on the way to school or home from school. Okay? And we know that. But fortunately, the incidence of drugs being located at the Westford Academy in particular is down substantially, which is a very positive sign, at least of ensuring a safe school environment. So as I understand, there's a fundraising effort to get a canine camera. Yes. Please tell us what. Training. Okay, I'm sorry. Required. Who will pay for this? Well, that dog will be under the care and custody and operation of the police department. The reason we're interested in it is because that dog can provide important surveillance. If we have an intruder in our building, we don't know necessarily where that intruder is. Now, there are those who say, well, we don't want to put a dog at that risk. Well, no, we don't. But we don't want to put a human being at that risk either. We've seen actual demonstrations. Corey Calder, the canine officer, showed us a demonstration of an actual apprehension of a suspect using a dog equipped with that camera. Just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. No lives were lost, no shots were fired. That dog knew exactly, the police outside of the building knew exactly where that suspect was. And proceeding to do it. So, in our schools, I want to give the police every chance to apprehend through that. So that's why we're very much in favor.
So is that something that will the dogs that we already have be able to do this? Will there be more training required?
There is more training, but one of the dogs is already trained with it. He's been training with a harness that is put on the dog, and it has a mock-up of the camera, so it's used to the weight, and it runs through the building, and it does its training already with it. So that's something that we've already been preparing for. We train every single day with that canine, and it's something that we just have to do. It's just this will be a tool for us, an officer safety tool.
For the town, not just the school.
For the town as well, and schools will benefit from it as well.
school committee fortunately supported some recommendations that I had, and you all supported at town meeting, some additional behavioral specialists, getting away from practice. We have contracted with the help of Superintendent and Jennifer, and Jennifer's with us, our school psychologist. We contracted with Project Interface through the Mass School of Professional Psychology. There's a phone service that parents can access 24 hours. But these are issues that go on minds, just a simple issue. It's not such a thing. These are sustained, severe in some cases, behavioral issues that we're not quite sure what the source is, quite honestly, but it's somewhat of a breakdown in some families. Just what it might be. But I know Sandy works along with us very carefully also. That's an area the school committee is familiar with that because we've talked about it repeatedly, and that's an area where if I had all of our administrators right here, it's the biggest concern that every one of them would express, Mary Claire. It's some of them don't necessarily, some of the children don't necessarily qualify for special education services, but we have to find a way to effectively service them, meet their needs at as low cost as possible. But it is an extraordinary issue that we're facing right now. Yes, yeah, and the incidence of autism is just staggering, and I know the nature of the services required because I have a grandchild that has autism, and know the intensity of services that are required. Okay, what is your thinking regarding funding for full-day kindergarten at some point in the next 3 to 5 years? Well, about, 3 years ago, I think I gave the school committee a little report on my recommendation for full-day kindergarten. If I could fund it myself, we would have had it about 3 years ago. But do I think it's necessary? Yes, I do. The interesting part is a lot of the research has focused on inner city schools and not on school systems that are similar in nature to Westford in terms of the demographics. A lot of the research also has shown that the gains in particularly reading scores that children acquire with a full-day kindergarten as opposed to a half-day dissipate after the 3rd grade. Now, do I think it's important, though, from developing a greater level of enduring understanding by students, or developing their social skills, and there's where maybe, because we've talked to all of the staff, their feeling is that if they have children for a more sustained period of time during the day, they'll be able to better identify, and then we'll be able to better treat at an earlier age those children with some of the social emotional issues. But many school systems across the country are adopting full day. Now, my philosophy, obviously, and it may not be yours, and I'd be very interested in hearing your opinion. My philosophy is if we provide full day kindergarten, that it should be fully funded. Because I don't want to see a situation where we have some children who can afford to take advantage of full day kindergarten come, and those whose parents can't be sitting at home. And so that's my personal philosophy. And I'm just interested in hearing from you because I think we're either all in or we're not. There is no halfway point with me and not 1 foot in. It's both feet in with full day kindergarten. I'm just interested in your ideas on that. Because if you differ with me, that's fine. I just would be interested in hearing what your thoughts are. All right? What? Someone please challenge me. That's what I'm up here. John? That's a great question. John asked, what are the facilities implications on full-day kindergarten? We have 3 primary level schools. Okay, the Robinson, the Nabnasset, and the Miller. 2 of those schools at the present time have the capacity to have full-day kindergarten. The Nabnasset does not. But that can be solved by some redistricting out of the Nabnasset-Abbott district to either the Miller Day district or the Robinson Pacific district. Okay, so what's aiding us in the possibility of housing that, John, is the fact that our our primary level enrollment is beginning to
Try to keep it from hitting that
to,
red line
redu-
at the top.
to decline somewhat, so that we have the capacity to accommodate those students if I do some minor redistricting. We do have some, let me just explain to you also, yes, I want to thank you for bringing that up, because that reminds me, we have a terrific committee that is working on a school capacity and utilization report. There's Angela Harkness, myself, Dennis Rona. Dennis is right here. Dennis and George are our quantitative empirical experts, I'll tell you. It's just outstanding with what they've derived. So what we're doing is we're actually going through each building. We're looking at the Department of the School Building Assistance, the Massachusetts School Building Authority specifications under which each building was developed and built, and looking at how each space is utilized at the present time. Now, we're also looking carefully at the fact that educators, like most other people, can sometimes expand to fill the space. So what we're looking at is what is legitimately needed for conducting our regular education classroom activities, and what is legitimately needed for our special needs educational programming. And critically looking at, is this space being utilized to the best in terms of its efficiency and its physical structure, or is it not? And that's what we're going to be looking at. We're looking at it now, we're looking at it through the summer and into the early fall, and we'll be presenting you with a report on how the schools are utilized. That begins to take the issue of, can we close a school away from just my opinion, which is a good thing. Okay, I'm not looking to keep schools open any more than we have to, and please don't anyone ever bring up the idea of building another school in Westford. We just don't want to hear that. But I don't see that happening. I honestly don't, because that would require, I think, a specific incremental increase in the ability to develop residential units, and I'm not sure that is evident in Westford. Okay, unless we get townwide sewerage, then there's another 30% housing permits beyond what we have capable now. John?
I have heard rumors that a school or so might close. Is that what prompted this committee to?
I'll tell you what prompted it, Johnny. We were talking about budget issues in our budget meetings way back, probably 6 or 7 months ago. And one of the school committee members, Judy Culver, who I absolutely love, worked with Judy for years and years and years, made a comment that if the issue of school funding and town finances becomes dramatic enough and severe enough, we may have to look at the very difficult decision of closing a school. Well, what happened is a number of residents heard that and said, well, maybe we can close a school. I'm telling you now, we can't. Do I think in the next 5 years that might be a possibility? That might be a possibility. It's hard to say. Here's the interesting thing: is the number of births in Westford is 1/2 right now of what it was about 10 to 12 years ago. We had close to 300 births back about 12 years ago. We have about 130 to 140 births per year in Westford. Now, that should mean that our enrollment will continue to decline. However, if you look at the trend in enrollment, system-wide enrollment, pre-K through 12, with a declining number of births in town, our enrollment hit a peak in 1999. Right now, 14 years later, we're within 44 students of that historical high enrollment. So what that says is there's a tremendous in-migration of people. And did we just score a goal, or so? Let me just, because I love, as you can tell, I love to talk. If any of you at any time have any questions that you want to come in and spend half hour, an hour, 2 hours talking with me, please let me know, because I will enjoy talking with you about any issue that involves the school system. Okay? But the in-migration factor in this town is significant right now in keeping the enrollment at a relatively stable level. It's So any other questions prior to intermission?
Well, hopefully it could
Don?
be a brief one. So at town meeting, we can measure a lot of things by how much they cost, how much we spend. What are some of the ways that we should be looking at the success of Westford Public Schools right now? Beyond the cost, how are we doing?
We're doing very well. I always bring along some information. You're welcome to take it. You don't have to. With the MCAS results from last year. As you know, we won't know what this year's MCAS results are until the fall. But we consistently score within the top 5 to 10% of all communities in the Commonwealth. In fact, I think Kelly Ross at the town meeting said if we could develop an efficiency index to apply to schools, we'd be one of the more efficient in the state because our achievement is off the charts. And keep this in mind. Our students, the students in Massachusetts score among the highest, first or second, every year, among all students in the country. Okay? And Westford students score among the highest in the state, which means our students score among the highest in the entire country. Now, our per pupil cost is in the bottom 15%. So on a cost-benefit ratio basis, it's a tremendous return on your investment. It's not easy to say that to you when you're saying, look, Bill, my tax bill is $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 a year. But when you compare it with the level of spending per pupil, the asset allocation per pupil, it's a tremendous bargain because we don't waste money in our school system. Okay, Mary Claire?
Kids come out, and any parent who would agree with me, they come out as critical thinkers. They come out with strong writing ability. Kids who are they're getting B's and C's in languages in high school are placing out of their language tests in college. Our kids are educated, they're well educated, and I think that, remember, is what the educational system here is all about.
Let me tell you where I hear that too, is my index called the sideline index, which is on the sidelines of football games in the fall. What happens is parents come up and they say to me, well, you don't know us and we've never met you, but they introduce themselves. I said, it's a pleasure to meet you. We have a son or a daughter at MIT, at UMass Lowell, at you name it. And we just want to tell you, we've heard from our son or daughter how much better prepared they are for their freshman year than most of their other students, their friends and colleagues in college. And that is what I hear every single fall when parents come to the football games and their kids are off to college, but calling home saying, Mom and Dad, this is almost like review to me when it's new material for most other students. Bill? That's correct. We have a very high cost percentage of the population. That's right. So about 25%. Yes, the cost per pupil is low. The overall outlay is difficult for most people. There's no question about it. And there's where, hopefully, a little bit more of a commercial industrial balance in the tax base may help the incidence of residential, tax payments in the future. So, Laura, did I miss anything on special education that's important for me to mention? Okay. Because Lenore is one of our a terrific special education teacher in our school system. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything of importance. Okay. Anything else before we end up? Dan? Dan? Any more state aid associated with what?
With full-day kindergarten.
Yes, there would be, because we get reimbursed, Dan, on each student in half-day kindergarten is counted as a 0.5 full-time equivalent student. So as that increases to 1.0, we would receive some incremental state aid. That's correct. Yeah.